Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Strength and Hormones podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Papanos, and today I'm joined by Aurora Colpo, and we're going to be talking about her journey into motherhood, her challenges with PCOS, and some of the hormone challenges that she dealt with leading into motherhood. I'd also love to hear a little bit about your experience with now having two children, as I have one of my own as well. And hopefully, this episode will really serve as some hope and connection for those of you who might be going through some similar challenges or journeys as Aurora has gone through and is currently going through. So, Aurora, welcome to the show and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, what a broad topic. I think the more I've learned about hormone health, the more I've learned that it's just kind of connected to absolutely every part of our lives, and it can't really be singled out, right? It's like all of our hormones. I think I used to equate hormones with like just making babies and puberty and that sort of thing, but it's like it dictates our entire well-being all day long and all night long. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And I know you have a background with having PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. And so I'd love to hear about some of that journey, just kind of like what led you to first seek answers in that area. What symptoms were you having that led to that diagnosis?
Yeah, so I mean, my symptoms went on for years before I really figured out what it was. It was a pretty recent diagnosis too. Um, but the thing is, it's like the diagnosis didn't really tell me anything other than anything that I didn't already know, because at the end of the day, like PCOS is just a combination of symptoms, and you have to have, I think, like four out of the five. I could try to name them. I think it's like high testosterone like symptoms. So you don't need to actually have high testosterone. I think that's a common misconception because a lot of people will get tested. Because I was like, I feel like I have high testosterone, like I'm having all these weird kind of like, hair where too much hair where you shouldn't, and then like thinning of hair on the head, and extra oily skin, and like cystic acne, especially around the jawline. But my testosterone levels were always within the normal range. So I was like, okay, well, it can't be that, but you just have to have the symptoms of it, not necessarily elevated testosterone. Like they call it the string of pearls. So that's something you need to look at on an actual ultrasound, like a vaginal ultrasound, where you can see lots of follicles around the ovaries. And which for me, I was like, oh, this is great. I have so many eggs, but my doctor was like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that these are high quality eggs. Um, so it's not a great thing if you have the string of pearls around your ovaries. And the other symptoms were like painful, heavy periods, or any like period irregularities. And then one of the other symptoms is weight gain or weight problems. And I didn't have any of that. That was like really kind of the biggest surprise to me was when I started managing my insulin resistance, which I never knew I had any type of insulin problem because I am a very fit person. I've always been. I work out a lot. I've never had problems with weight gain. I know people listening are probably like, "Oh, good for you," but because I know people struggle with that, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But it's never been part of my story. I come from a family that's like has fast metabolism, and I work out all the time, so it's just weight has never been an issue for me. So I never thought that like diabetes, like I thought blood sugar problems was like manifested in diabetes like symptoms. I just was ignorant towards it. So when I realized that all of the acne that I was having and my mood swings and like some of the like depressive like symptoms were really just directly related to the problems that I was having with my insulin due to my PCOS, and I treated that, like my whole world changed. So it's pretty crazy. So out of those symptoms, I had the like high testosterone like symptoms, and I had the string of pearls, and then I had heavy and painful periods my whole life, but I never had weight gain or any symptoms along like the along that those lines. So anyway, that was my diagnosis. I mean, my periods were always like super heavy. In retrospect, I did have miscarriages. I don't know how much of that was tied into it. Um, you just don't like it probably had something to do with it, only because of what my doctor had said about the quality of the eggs being compromised, and Yeah, so I had several miscarriages, and I think maybe that had something to do with um with PCOS as well. And I've definitely had it my whole life.
Yeah. Well, you bring up such a good point that like there are so many different what we call phenotypes of PCOS where like not everyone presents in the same way. There's what we call lean PCOS, which it sounds like maybe what you had, where you have these abnormalities like biochemically within labs and how your body's functioning, but you're not seeing the metabolic piece of PCOS, which is the weight gain aspect. And also with the insulin resistance, I think that is a common misconception that, people that have insulin resistance are always going to be overweight. But I mean, we work primarily with people that are active, former athletes, a lot of exercisers, and like they're very lean individuals that are dealing with insulin resistance. Like I've been insulin resistant at one point in my life too. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up, and hopefully also kind of lands with a lot of listeners too who might be kind of wondering, okay, like why am I having some of these symptoms and I don't quite fit the classic criteria for something like PCOS, just to kind of drive that further. I would love to hear a little bit about your fertility journey. I know you mentioned having some miscarriages with, I think you said your son, your first baby, and walk us through kind of like what that experience was like for you and how your PCOS played into that. Like, did you get diagnosed after having the miscarriages?
Yeah, so no, so what happened with that was one of the symptoms of PCOS is like irregular periods too, and that was one that I never had. My periods are always like 28 days. I know because they're extremely painful. I know when they're coming, my mood just completely dips. It's like, it's regular, but it's not, evidently it shouldn't be painful and dramatic, and you shouldn't have to suffer every month. But anyway, when I was in high school, I was put on birth control because of the acne, due to the PCOS. But they were like, "We'll just give you birth control and put a Band-Aid on that." Um, and and then not it wasn't until I was trying, like I was trying to get pregnant. So I think when I was like 20, well, I had my son when I was 28. So when I was 27, I went off the birth control to kind of like prepare for that. And then my symptoms came back, like the acne came back. And while I was on birth control, because essentially it was just like shutting off my cycle, I was like, this is great. I don't have any symptoms of PCOS. So I thought birth control was like my saving grace. It's interesting because I'm divorced now, and they say that like when you're on birth control, maybe you pick partners that are not really right for you. And I totally picked somebody during that period who ended up like not being my, somebody who I was forever compatible with. That's just a little side thesis. But so when I was trying to get pregnant, I never had a problem getting pregnant. Like I could get pregnant within 3 months, which is pretty common, and I think what people hope for. And it was that I couldn't keep the pregnancy. So that happened like twice where I would be able to keep the I would be pregnant. I would even see a heartbeat, and then around like 9 weeks, we would lose the heartbeat. One of them happened at 12 weeks, which was like pretty devastating because I had already told so many people. And that was the first one, which it was just like something I wasn't expecting because I thought I was like a healthy person, and I didn't know that it was that common. And I would read like the stats too. That's actually not very common to lose a pregnancy after, after every week. It becomes less and less more likely that that's going to happen. So that was super devastating. And of course I did all the chromosomal tests, and I did all of the I had my partner get checked and me get checked for all the DNA abnormalities that could have taken place. And basically like they didn't really have anything to say about it. Other than just like this is something that happens to unlucky people sometimes. And then I ended up getting pregnant, and I had a baby to full term, and he's a healthy, very driving me crazy, annoying 6-year-old right now. um, and I have a 4-year-old daughter as well. So, but in between the two of them too, I didn't go back on, so after I had him, I had postpartum, what I now have coined as like catastrophic anxiety. Well, I didn't coin that, but my psychiatrist did. And that was something that I still don't know, like if it has to, like I feel like I know when a hormone shift happens. I can tell when it's a situational depression, and then when it's like a hormone induced depression, anxiety type of situation. And I do feel like that is connected to my PCOS. It's not something that I could really pinpoint, but that was during the time, like I wasn't on birth control after my son and before I had my daughter. So I was like, just left to kind of my own body's devices of trying to regulate itself after years of birth control, then a couple failed pregnancies, then a full term pregnancy, and then now my body's like, okay, well, who are we now? Let's try to regroup. um and I ended up going on Zoloft, which like helped my symptoms feel better, but I wanted to get pregnant again, so I went off of it, got pregnant, and then during my daughter's pregnancy I experienced perinatal depression, where I was just like, it was just like the same symptoms of, it was 2020, it was COVID, and it was like, and I was pregnant, and it's actually, my psychiatrist was telling me that if you've ever experienced like postpartum depression or those types of like hormonal feelings, I mean, I guess I'm calling it hormonal, but I guess a psychiatrist would probably call it mental changes. Like the likelihood of it coming back is pretty high, especially during a following pregnancy, and that's what happened to me. And I had to make the decision to go back on Zoloft during my pregnancy, which was like a super hard decision to make. But I was really I was feeling like super low and very low energy, and so I had to weigh like what's better for my baby at this time. And I ended up going back on, and it really helped, but it wasn't something that I wanted to stick with, forever, because and I also made the choice. There was all these statistics about like autism rates being like exacerbated when you're taking an SSRI, and I knew I was having a girl, and that girls are less likely to have autism. So I was just like, there's so many. I'm thinking of the meme with like all the math equations. Anyway, so I know I'm on a tangent right now, but anyway, delivered her. That was a whole other. She was wrapped in her cord, and I had an emergency C-section, and then went off the Zoloft and struggled with the same symptoms until I was diagnosed with PCOS. And then my treatment protocol for that, I think, pretty much saved my moods.
Mm.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm sorry that that is the journey that led you to that, but I'm so glad that you're doing so much better at this point.
Thanks.
Um, were you like breastfeeding postpartum and then whenever like some of the postpartum anxiety was happening?
Yeah, so I was breastfeeding my son. I breastfed him for like almost 2 years. So that was he like refused bottles and would only take a
I'm too.
nipple, and yeah,
Yeah.
lovely. Like it's the feeling of trapped that nobody understands unless you've been there before. But it's like, and everybody will be like, oh well, he's not going to starve himself. Just like leave for 24 hours. And it's like every cell in my body says I'm not going to starve my baby. You're like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah. Hearing them
But
cry is like the worst feeling in the entire world.
I know. And I'm like, he's hungry. I don't want him to think that I'm not feeding him on purpose. And everyone was like, well, then he's just always only going to take your boob. And he just always did until I weaned him with like chocolate milk, because it was the only, because he was like too big for a bottle at that point anyway. Man. Yeah. So yeah, I was breastfeeding, and it was like, it wasn't it wasn't what I had thought like postpartum depression was, because what I had heard of it was kind of, the like Brooke Shields kind of very publicized account, or you hear these stories on the news where like moms want to, like they go into psychosis and they drown their babies, or they are so depressed and they can't get out of bed, they can't care for their child. It was like I was the opposite, where everybody was like, oh, you're like, from the outside, it was like, oh, you care too much, you're too good of a mom, you're too like on high alert. But I was just so hyper vigilant to a point where I think my cortisol was just raised for the first year, permanently. And I could walk into a room and it was like a superpower. I could be like a sharp edge, ledge, hot object, like all, it's just like you could just do like a cursory glaze of like any room and figure out all the things that could cause, you have like this wild imagination for all the things that could go wrong, and it will torture you. And it's no way to live. And I think it wasn't until it was causing problems with my relationship, because it's hard to live with anybody like that. And like we obviously weren't sleeping together either, because I was breastfeeding all night, and because I was like nervous he was going to roll over or he was snoring, just all the things. And
Yeah.
so I went to see somebody and they were like, yeah, no, it's common, but it's not normal. And you shouldn't be feeling this way. You should be able to relax, and you should be able to, not like, it wasn't just with my own child either. It was like, if I heard a story on the news of something, I remember something horrible happened during that time. It was like a dad who left his twins in a hot car and they died. And like, I just remember I could not shake that story. Like, it sat on my chest for weeks. And it's normal to feel empathy for someone else's situation, but it's not normal for it to be ruminating in your mind and for you to feel so sad about it, like it had happened to you, you know?
Mhm.
So that's how I knew that it was not normal. And I went on Zoloft, and I'm hesitant to give people that advice because I know there's so many conflicting views of SSRIs. And I'm even at a point now where feel like I can solve most of my problems with acupuncture, and I love doing it that way. I do feel like SSRIs put a Band-Aid on something, but for me at the time, it was like a very needed Band-Aid, and it helped to fix the problem fairly quickly. And it really helped me. So, going off of it and going on it was like a little bit of, it was a struggle. And whether or not it makes it more likely that it's going to come back, I don't really know. But all I know is that during that time, like, it was just so stressful, and I was very grateful to have that.
Yeah, and I think that's where like conventional medicine like does come into the picture, right? Is it's when you're in these more acute like crises or moments, you need a solution to be able to help get you to a place where then like you can manage things with more of these alternative medicine type options like acupuncture and more functional methods and such. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that makes absolute sense and I totally resonate with you of like just I mean, the amount of like safety precautions I even find like when I drive now, it's like
Yeah. I know.
just like so worried about making sure I look over my shoulder like 14 times,
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh my God, the baby's like in that on
On
that
that
side. Like
side, and like, if yeah. Absolutely.
it's yeah, it's a whole thing. But I think part of that is like our brains wanting us to be wired to protect our babies. But then, like you said, it's kind of like, okay, what's normal? And then what is, something that's actually impacting your daily function. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I wonder too, like, did you ever have your progesterone levels checked during any of this time when you were trying to conceive? Was that ever an issue for you?
I remember having them checked because but it was never an issue because I don't know if I had it checked at the right time. It was never an issue getting pregnant, so my progesterone levels were pretty good. They probably dipped off at a certain point, and that, but I don't really know because I never had them checked consistently during the first couple months.
Yeah.
That was the thing. It's like I I feel like with like our medical system, if I was to have a baby again, I would probably do more of a concierge, like just pay out of pocket for a little bit more help because they don't even let you come in usually until you're like at least like 9 weeks or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So at that point I had already, it was either there was heartbeat or there wasn't, and I was getting positive pregnancy tests all the time, but not always getting a heartbeat.
Yeah, I know. It is hard. I think I didn't even have my first ultrasound until I was like 10 weeks,
Yeah.
but thankfully like I can order my own lab. So I was like going into the lab like every day after five
Yeah.
weeks
Yeah.
to make sure that
Wow, 5 weeks.
everything was like good, but probably also a little bit overkill, So it's like
Yeah.
how do you find a happy medium between the two?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've like come off the Zoloft and you're utilizing acupuncture. You feel like that's been huge for you. Tell us a little bit about some of like what's been going on the past couple of years with utilizing acupuncture. Like, what are some of the benefits you've seen with it? What are some of the other more like natural methods that you find are really helping with your mood regulation?
Yeah. So the natural methods that I have put into place is like it's which is so strange to me, but it's mostly around my blood sugar, which is I'm saying it's strange because I just never knew that I had an issue with that, and like I never would have thought that in a million years. So originally I had just gone on, my doctor was like, you should go on birth control and you should go on metformin. And I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to go on birth control because I know that that is not something that, like, I have a podcast called Barely Filtered, and I have so many people on all the time who just have nothing good to say about birth control. And I'm like, I want to try to find a better solution to this. So I made it, I kind of compromised. I'm like, I'll go on the metformin, and that's something that would stabilize my blood sugar. You could probably speak more to exactly the science behind that, but I'm not going to go on birth control. I'm going to do acupuncture, and my acupuncturist specializes in hormone regulation, and so I'd go to her once a week, and she was like, you shouldn't be on the metformin. We need to get you off that. That's putting a band-aid on it, and we can solve it here. That was also one of the times where I just had to make a decision of like, okay, it's too stressful for me to deal with everything at once right now. Like, let's just do the acupuncture and not the birth control, but I'm going to stay on the metformin. And because I was having all these acne symptoms still, and that like contributed to like me, if you have acne, it can contribute to just not feeling good. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, basically I felt like it was giving me a reset. All like it didn't work right away, but if I went for about 5 sessions, what I started to feel was just an overall like attuning to my whole system, and I just felt like happier, and like my skin was clearing up, and there wasn't like mood swings. My periods were lighter and shorter. The first period you get when you start the acupuncture, or I got when I started the acupuncture, was actually kind of wonky and like kind of heavy and not ran at a weird time, and there's spotting, but then it's almost like it was like adjusting to birth control, where now they're just kind of lighter, not painful. And to not have a painful period, it was just like such a weird concept to me, because I thought it was just something that that's what they are. um, and so that was amazing. The acupuncture, I was also doing kind of like a fasting in the morning. I had done that for a while, and what I had learned is it wasn't really working for me. I started learning about like cycle syncing, and kind of catering my exercise and my fasting, and the types of food that I ate around my cycle.
Mhm.
And that was kind of fun for me because I'm a little woo woo like that. And I'm like, ooh, I feel like a witch, like that all different parts of the month. I need like something a little different. Um, and I read a book called Period Power by Maisie Hill, which I love, that talks a little bit about the cycle syncing. And there's another woman, Elisa Vitti, who wrote Woman Code. She wrote And in the Flow. She has an app called Flow app. But basically, both of these women are all about like, instead of just like slapping a band-aid solution with birth control or whatever, shutting down your whole cycle, like that you can lean into the different phases of your cycle, and kind of like harness the superpower that exists within each one. It's kind of nice to have a week every month to be like, can't do anything. Sorry, I'm about to get my period.
E&D.
Yeah.
I love it. Was there any types of herbs or supplementation that you were utilizing conjunctively with the dietary changes you were making?
Yeah, so I definitely used supplements, inositol.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one that was helping with my blood sugar. I guess you could speak more towards that. DIM, vitamin B5, vitamin A, glutathione, turmeric, milk thistle, and then digestive enzymes.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you got some like detoxification, liver support in there, some estrogen metabolism, and then yeah, the inositol is great. And I actually have a supplement called Hormone Potion, and it's made from the myo-inositol. Sometimes with PCOS, if you have like high androgens, then it's recommended to use the blend where it's D-chiro and myo-inositol. But the myo-inositol is the most abundant one that your body actually makes, mainly in your brain, actually.
Mm.
And it's great for improving insulin sensitivity, helping with blood sugar, helping with mood, helping with sleep, helping even lower thyroid antibodies in situations like Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So it's pretty crazy.
Oh wow. Okay,
Yeah.
so myo inositol is different than just like inositol.
Inositol is like the family, and then there's
Okay,
certain forms of it. So
got
there's
it.
myo-inositol, which is one form, and then there's dechiro-inositol, which is another form. But inositol is like the umbrella term for both of them.
Mhm,
And myo-inositol is the one that your body actually naturally makes, and then it converts it over to dechiro-inositol.
mhm,
But there are some supplement companies that sell them as blends where it has the dechiro and myo in there, because there's some research in more of like high androgen PCOS that the D-chiro has added benefits for lowering androgens like testosterone and DHEA.
mhm.
Personally, like I chose to just utilize myo-inositol in our hormone potion because it's more universal and the body naturally converts it over. And some people, like you said, don't have high androgens; they have normal testosterone levels, right? And you don't want to lower testosterone further if your
Right,
testosterone is already on the lower end, which
right.
for some women it already is.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I have a question for you then. Well, two. So would you recommend somebody trying this type of a route with the myo-inositol rather than something like a metformin?
Generally, yeah, because with any pharmaceutical, there's always drawbacks, right? So, like metformin, we know can cause vitamin depletions, especially like some of your B vitamins. So, like, there's one risk of that. Some people also don't tolerate metformin well; they get like really bad leg cramps and things because of
Mm.
some of the electrolyte abnormalities. So, if we can always go the natural route, let's do it because there's just going to be less side effects of it. But also, there's something called berberine that you might have heard of before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, berbeриne's an herb, and it works more similar to metformin than inositol does. They both are great for blood sugar, but berberine actually it just is like the same mechanism of how it works as metformin, and that it works on what's called AMPK. So it's just like a certain pathway in the body. So a lot of times, if someone like really is at that like pre-diabetes stamp, place where they really need some of that metabolic support, it can be even helpful to do a blend between inositol and berberine to try to get some of the similar benefits you would get from metformin.
Okay. And like if I was going to wean off of metformin, obviously talk to my doctor or whatever,
Yeah.
um, would you start this myo-inositol and berberine while you're still on the metformin, or would that be like too much?
No, you can. There's actually some good research that berberine plus metformin is more powerful than metformin alone.
Hmm.
So you definitely can do them at the same time, and then you can add the inositol into it. The only thing I warn people about is to make sure you're not going hypoglycemic when you do that, because that's a lot of blood sugar support at the same time, right?
Right.
So whether it's just like tracking your blood sugar if you're a data type person, or if you want to just go based off symptoms, and like if you're starting to feel really hangry or lightheaded or like you're going to faint, then those are signs of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. Probably need to look at pulling one of the blood sugar support options out of the puzzle.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the things that kind of caught my eye with my blood sugar is I used a continuous glucose monitor
Mhm.
kind of just for fun because I
Yeah.
like that data type stuff. And what I was seeing was spikes in my blood sugar during times when I wasn't even eating, like when I was sleeping or and I'm like, how does that something has to be off. It was like the food like didn't even really matter.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I wonder, like, too, just some of the things you've said, like, because we call them like four different types of PCOS. Have you ever heard of that before?
No.
So there's like four different origins, and a lot of times people have several that are connected, but there's like adrenal PCOS, where your adrenal glands that are what make stress hormones like cortisol are the main contributor of the androgens that are causing the PCOS. There's like insulin resistance PCOS, which it sounds like that's definitely a piece for you, and that's the most common. About 70% of women have that. There's post birth control PCOS, where it's like triggered by coming off the pill. And
Mm.
then there's also inflammatory PCOS, which is more of like this immune system trigger where a lot of women have an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's, and it's because of the autoimmunity that's driving the PCOS.
Oh.
Yeah, but because cortisol, which is like that stress hormone we make when we're under stress, because it's a glucocorticoid, which means that when you are stressed, your body mobilizes sugar.
Mm.
A lot of times with women that have adrenal PCOS, these like whenever there's a cortisol elevation, it's driving the PCOS. So it's like
Mm.
not even like something you're eating. It's not even something that's like coming from your ovaries. It's just like purely because of the stress response that's playing a role in the PCOS.
Okay, so would you recommend that somebody who has that type wouldn't do like high intensity workouts?
It could be helpful. Yeah, like we definitely know that cortisol increases during moderate to high intensity exercise. It's an acute increase, so it's not like it's happening forever,
Hmm.
but it more so is just like you really want to be careful with how often you're doing those types of workouts. Like I definitely wouldn't recommend back-to-back days or more than
Okay.
a couple times per week. And then you want to be really careful about your blood sugar around those workouts because if you do a high intensity workout and your blood sugar is low going into that,
Hmm.
that's going to exacerbate the cortisol response because
Oh.
your body is releasing that, trying to get that glucose to be able to keep your blood sugar regulated during that workout,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
So,
And usually people
yeah,
don't like eat before they work out. So I
exactly.
guess you'd have to schedule that a time like where eat something where it's going to sustain your blood sugar for a little while.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely want to be like mindful of eating before and after those types of workouts so that you can keep that blood sugar and ultimately the cortisol more regulated.
okay, interesting.
But yeah, so that's often like a lot of times what will cause the like blood sugar elevations when you're sleeping. And then some people they go like the opposite where they go kind of low blood sugar. And so then their body is like, oh, let me, counter regulate this. And then their body releases more of that blood sugar from storage to keep things regulated. So yeah, the CGMs are like such a cool, insightful tool, aren't they, to be able to
Yeah.
understand what's happening.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I was more confused than like was understanding. So, but at least it kind of signaled me that something was not totally normal.
Yeah, it's a lot of data. And for some people too, I always tell like more type A individuals, I'm like, you're going to love this, but also like we need to set boundaries with it because it can be a little bit addicting. It's almost
Yeah.
like counting calories, but in a different way. And I
Yeah.
think it's a better solution than counting calories, in my opinion. But it also is a lot of numbers.
It is. Yeah. It was weird to see something like spike, something that I thought was healthy, like, I don't know, some kind of like chicken noodle soup or something kind of spike my blood sugar just as much as like a cupcake in
Yeah.
certain. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, well, I guess it doesn't even matter what I eat if it's going to, but I guess, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, you're like, I guess I can have a little bit of cupcake then. So
yeah.
yeah, there could be some like improvements to food relationship, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
With doing that. What do you feel like are some of the biggest misconceptions you've learned along the journey in this whole conversation? Maybe it's related to blood sugar or fertility or PCOS.
The symptoms having to be like outward facing. I think a lot
Mhm.
of times, like you think somebody needs to be overweight, or the acne, obviously for me was an outward facing symptom, but just like a mental symptom, not feeling well, like not like having your moods not be regulated. Like can be that can be directly related to your hormone. Where I feel like for me, for a long time, I was like, okay, well, do I have depression? Do I have anxiety? Do I have you
Mhm.
know it just felt like it was something more in the psychiatric department when it was just my hormones needing to be regulated. So that was something that I wish I had known. Um, I wish I wish I had known probably about something like acupuncture a while ago. I do think it's you have to be patient with the process, and I tend to be somebody who wants to like fix something quickly. But just getting on a protocol with that, I wish I had known about earlier, especially before my pregnancies. I also do lymphatic massages, which I feel like it's part of like my detox protocol, but that I feel like has really helped a lot with um, balancing my hormones and maintaining like um a healthy skin too, just because a lot of the jawline acne is like just built up of the hormones like in this area, and doing like working with your lymph nodes around here was something that I didn't even hadn't even occurred to me. I kind of just that fell into my lap a little bit because one of my friends owns a studio. So that was is just like a little, I don't know, a little pro tip that I love. And yeah, and then just like eating healthy and some of these supplements being just as helpful as like taking a pharmaceutical. That I wish I had known that. Um, yeah. And then again, just like getting more support early on in my pregnancy journey, both of them, and having more like holistic support, I think would have been helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think those are really good pieces of recommendation. I love lymphatic drainage too. I think it can be such a great tool for so many different purposes in the
Yeah,
body.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, you have two little ones, and I'm sure you're like super busy. Tell us about how it is managing that. Like, what are some of the things you found to be super helpful in being successful entrepreneur and then also being a mom and all those things?
Yeah. Well, for me, I really have, I know the likelihood of when I'll do something. So it's nice to have these great ideas about when you're gonna, about trying to accomplish everything in one day. And I think for me, I know that after like 3 p.m., I'm pretty useless in terms of accomplishing very much. So if I'm gonna work out, I really have to schedule it in. I have to do it beforehand, and I need to work out every single day. For my mental health and clarity and all of that. So I usually will try to schedule all of my workouts like on Sunday so that I can fit them in throughout the week. And some days I can't make it work. Like usually like usually 2 times a week. I just can't make it work with a workout that day. But that's something that's like my number one priority. Something that I feel like works really well when I do it, but I want to get better at doing more of it is kind of meal prepping and having healthy foods on hand, because I tend to be somebody who is so busy and I forget to eat. Um, and that causes me issues because then I'll find myself either like being hangry or low blood sugar. And then I just will reach for whatever's near me. And a lot of times it happens to be something that's just going to spike my blood sugar, which does not help anything. So I'll usually keep like some snacks in my car. I'll keep like chomps, like meat sticks in my car, or something where that's going to give me either some quick protein or like sustained uh, just like a sustained energy rather than a spike.
Mhm.
So keep that in, or some nuts or something. Um, I and then also just kind of catering my lifestyle to my cycle, and not being too hard on myself about getting in workouts like the week before my period. I like, especially this past month, I was like, I wasn't quite tracking my cycle, and I should. And then when my period came, I was just like, no wonder like all of this has, like, I just felt, you just feel like shit's hitting the fan, and I'm like, I must be getting my period. And that's exactly what was happening. But now I use the Flow app, and it's helpful. It's helpful to know, like, when you don't want to have sex. It's helpful to know when you it's, for me, it's birth control. It's helpful to know, like, why you might be feeling a certain way. Although it's not normal now for me to feel like super moody or super depressed before my period, but like a little bit sometimes. And it kind of just takes the guilt out of that equation. So that's nice. And then kind of I cater my diet more towards the phase of my cycle that I'm in, which is nice.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And do you feel like with all those changes that for your skin piece of your healing journey that just kind of like instantly started to clear, or was there anything else that you felt like was really helpful in helping progress your skin journey?
For me, it was like almost entirely stabilizing my blood sugar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's incredible.
it's stabilizing my blood sugar, and then the lymphatics, and
Mhm.
like elevating that. I mean, incorporating that type of like detox. I also do a lot of hot yoga. That's one of the workouts that I really love. Although melasma was one of my symptoms after pregnancy, and I had like my melasma was pretty bad, and hot yoga can still kind of exacerbate that sometimes, but it's like it's not something I'm willing to give up. Maybe you can shed a little light onto that. But is melasma an inflammatory response?
It's definitely very hormonally rooted, and so that's why, like, pregnancy will trigger it very often, and then some women also, like, experience it postpartum, but with anything skin related, there's always, like, a big GI inflammation aspect because most of the inflammation in our body comes from our gut, so that's always gonna be a huge piece to, like, where someone needs support, and, like, I think probably part of what really helped you with your skin too is that you were doing the lymphatic drainage. It sounds like you've been on some detox support too, where you're supporting your liver. And like your liver, we don't really think of it as part of our gut, but it is part of that because everything goes through our liver and then it comes out the gut. So if we're supporting our liver, we're ultimately also going to be supporting our gut in
Interesting.
turn. Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think I also don't drink as much as I used to too. Like I used to kind of be like a glass of wine. After having kids and being a new mom, I was stressed, and I was always having a glass of wine. I have a glass of wine like every single night, and I think that was killing my microbiome. And that's just not part of my routine anymore, my lifestyle. It's because I think I just made the connection of how like many cons it was creating in my life rather than pros. Everything from sleep, like my aura ring would tell me like one glass of wine and like would, completely disrupt my entire night's sleep. So that's something I definitely cut out. I think that's helped my gut health overall too. But that's another thing that I didn't really realize. Like I never had like diarrhea, constipation. I feel like those are like the two symptoms that you think of like, oh, how's your stomach? Like fine. So I never really thought that maybe I needed to pay attention to my gut because like had like, I went to the bathroom regularly.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of times I think that's exactly what people say. They're like, I don't have any GI issues. Like, I'm totally regular. I'm like, but you have an autoimmune disease or like you have a skin condition. So, like, there's
Yeah.
something going on in the gut, right? We just
Right.
have to, everyone has something imbalanced in the gut, unfortunately, because we're just constantly coming into contact with different microbes and things and toxins in our environment.
What would you say to somebody who doesn't really know if they have like what's one thing that we can do to support our gut that's kind of universal?
Well, I mean, for most people, having a diversity of different plants in the diet, like we know is going to be one of the best ways to support those microbes and like have a good diversity of bacteria. The caveat is that if you have dysbiosis or like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that could actually make you feel worse because you have too much bacteria. And so we need to get rid of some of that bacteria. So there is like some caveats to that. But generally speaking, if you don't have something like bacterial overgrowth or SIBO, then just plant diversity, eating a wide diversity vegetables, legumes, seeds, herbs, all those types of things are going to be super helpful. And then I think that pretty much everyone at this point has like what we call a leaky gut, or more like medically is called intestinal permeability. So having some element of some like leaky gut and liver support on an ongoing basis, I think is super helpful. And that generally for like more of this leaky gut piece is going to be things like demulcent herbs like aloe vera, slippery elm, marshmallow root, L-glutamine, zinc carnosine. These are like some of the different tools that can be utilized to help strengthen that gut lining so we can
Okay.
prevent this like leaky gut situation. But that's one of the things that alcohol does to the gut is that it causes more of this leaky gut, and that's creating some of this inflammatory environment. And that's a lot of times why, like, if you drink a lot of alcohol, you get these like alcohol poops, right, where you often will have like loose stools,
Right.
because you're getting this like increased inflammation after.
Okay. Yeah, that makes it all the more unattractive
Yeah,
to drink.
I think so.
Yeah, I have something from the supplement company called the Thorne Supplement Company.
Mhm.
It's called Fibermend
Yeah.
and L-glutamine. So I think I need to start maybe just putting that back in because I don't think I'm doing anything for my gut right now. And like probiotics, I guess you kind of get those through the food, but pro and prebiotics.
Yeah, yeah. Again, like great for people that don't have bacterial overgrowth. If you can do like food sources, fermented vegetables are going to be the best. I really love like an A2 kefir, but you could also do like kimchi, sauerkraut, those types of options.
Okay.
But yeah, and like the leaky gut stuff too, you can kind of use on an as need basis. So sometimes, like when I'm working with patients, we'll use it every day to be able to heal the gut. And then after that, I'm like, hey, if you're going to like go out and not eat great, you're going to like eat something is not great for you, take the leaky gut support like that day and then for like the next day. Or if you're going to have some alcohol, take the leaky gut support that day and the next day. So we're just using it more as
Like
like,
L-glutamine or and Fibermen, or
yeah,
you're talking like a kefir.
the L-glutamine and fiber mend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can kind of
Interesting.
use them like that, more of like a kind of ointment, if you will, when there's situations that are creating more of this leaky gut type situation.
So are you not anti-dairy? Like you always hear people being like, okay, well, if you want to reduce inflammation, like you should eliminate dairy and dairy and what's the other one that everybody's
Like
saying?
gluten.
Yeah, gluten, dairy.
Yeah. It really depends. I mean, we know that 70% of the population does get an inflammatory response to the beta casomorphin, which is what's in classical dairy. But that's why I said like A2, because for those that aren't familiar too, A2 is just the protein of the type of like protein in the milk. So traditionally in the US, the cows that we use are the A1 protein,
Mm.
which there's higher levels of that beta casomorphin that most people get an inflammatory response to. In Europe, they use more of the cows that have the A2 protein, and you can actually buy A2 milk now at the store. Like my favorite brand is Alexandre,
Mhm.
and that most people have less of an inflammatory response to. I still typically will tell people, like, if they're having issues like postnasal drip, clearing their throat after consuming dairy, there's probably still some sensitivity going on. And like sometimes if we heal the leaky gut, that'll actually correct itself.
Mhm.
Other times it won't. So it can be helpful to at least do a trial where you take it out and see how you do. But relatively speaking, I would say most people do pretty good if they're doing more of the A2 types of dairy.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's A2 is what is the type of protein that's in, like, sheep's and goat's milk as
Okay.
well, so that's why a lot of times people are like, "I had feta and I feel fine." I'm like, "Yeah, because it's a different type of protein than you would get if you had, like, mozzarella cheese."
Got it. Okay.
Well, Aurora, thank you so much for all of your insights and wisdom, and also just like your vulnerability and sharing with us your story and providing some tidbits into what you've been doing over the past years to be able to really support yourself. It's really just been like such a beautiful journey that you've taken us on. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And I would love for you to share for women that are listening where they can learn more about you, your podcast, and your overall brand.
Yeah, so you can find me at Aurora Colpo. That's just on Instagram. And then I have a podcast called Barely Filtered. And we talk about mostly relationships and dating and marriage and attachment styles and things like that. But also, sprinkled in is always a lot of other subjects, and one of them is that I've talked about in the past is hormone health. My listeners are mostly women, but we have some men in there too. So just open to everybody coming and listening. And you can find that on Spotify, Apple, and Barely Filtered Pod on Instagram.
Amazing. And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.